What do you say to the American people who are confronting this new reality?
First of all, my heart goes out to those who have already lost someone or those who are suffering from the virus. This is bigger than any one of us. Calls for a national rallying to everybody move together. I laid out in detail what I would do if were I president today. You can go to joebiden.com, I laid it out in significant detail.
Senator Sanders, this morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci acknowledged that it's possible that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans could die from the coronavirus in a worst-case scenario. If you were president right now, what's the most important thing you would do tonight to try to save American lives?
Well, first thing we have got to do, whether or not I'm president, is to shut this president up right now. Because he is undermining the doctors and the scientists who are trying to help the American people. It is unacceptable for him to be blabbering with unfactual information, which is confusing the general public.
The idea that we are not prepared for this and the other thing I want to point out, and I agree with Bernie, we're in a situation where we have to now be providing for the hospitals that are going to be needed now. The present system cannot handle the surge that is likely to come. So we should already be sitting down and planning where we're going to put these temporary hospitals. And we can do that. We did that. We've been through this before with the coronavirus. We've been through this before, we've been through this before with dealing with the viruses that the N1H15, as well as what happened in Africa. We provided these hospitals dealing with these great pandemics, and we were able to do it quickly, and people would have a place to go. But we also have to provide the equipment to protect the first responders, and that's not being done either.
If you were president right now, what would you do to make sure every sick American is able to get treatment so the U.S. does not suffer the same fate as Italy, where doctors have to decide right now who gets life-saving treatment and who does not?
Jake, let's be honest and understand that this coronavirus pandemic exposes the incredible weakness and dysfunctionality of our current healthcare system. Now, we're spending twice as much per person on healthcare as the people of any other country. How in God's name does it happen that we end up with 87 million people who are uninsured or underinsured, and there are people who are watching this program tonight who say, I'm not feeling well. Should I go to the doctor? But I can't afford to go to the doctor. What happens if I am sick? It's going to cost thousands of dollars for treatment. Who's going to feed my kids? We are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. We're spending so much money, and yet we are not even prepared for this pandemic. How come we don't have enough doctors? How come hospitals in rural areas are shutting down? How come people can't afford to get the prescription drugs they need because we have a bunch of crooks who are running the pharmaceutical industry, ripping us off every single day? And I'll tell you something right now. In the midst of this epidemic, you got people in the pharmaceutical industry who are saying, oh, wow, what an opportunity to make a fortune. So the word has got to go out, and I certainly would do this as president. You don't worry. People of America, do not worry about the cost of prescription drugs. Do not worry about the cost of the health care that you're going to get, because we are a nation, a civilized, democratic society. Everybody, rich and poor, middle class, will get the care they need. The drug companies will not rip us off.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Biden, some medical experts are saying the only true way to control this virus is through a national quarantine, requiring every American other than essential personnel to stay home. Would you take that unprecedented step of a national lockdown?
What I would do is what we did in our administration. I would call a meeting in the Situation Room of all the experts in America dealing with this crisis. I would sit them down and I would do exactly what we did then. What is it that we need? Listen to the experts. What do we need? And with all due respect to Medicare for All, you have a single-payer system in Italy. It doesn't work there. It has nothing to do with Medicare for All. That would not solve the problem at all. We can take care of that right now by making sure that no one has to pay for treatment, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for whatever drugs are needed, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for hospitalization because of the crisis, period. That is a national emergency, and that's how it's handled. It is not working in Italy right now, and they have a single-payer system. Now, with regard to what else I would do, the fact is that we're in a position where I would bring together the leading experts in the world instead of doing this in the United States, instead of doing this piecemeal, sit down and do what we did before with the Ebola crisis. What is needed? And have one voice, like we did every day we met in that crisis in the Situation Room, so we lay out overall for all the nation what the best proposal is and how to move forward. In the absence of that, governors are making some sound decisions. They're doing the best they can by going out and getting the healthcare experts in their communities and their states to move. But it should be directed from the White House, from the Situation Room, laying out in detail like we did in the Ebola crisis, and we beat it.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, your response?
Well, first of all, the dysfunctionality of the current healthcare system is obviously apparent. And bottom line here is, in terms of Medicare for all, despite what the vice president is saying, what the experts tell us is that one of the reasons that we are unprepared and have been unprepared is we don't have a system. We got thousands of private insurance plans. That is not a system that is prepared to provide health care to all people. In a good year, without the epidemic, we're losing up to 60,000 people who die every year because they don't get to a doctor on time. And clearly this crisis is only making a bad situation worse.
That has nothing to do when you're in a national crisis. The national crisis says we're responding. It's all free. You don't have to pay for a thing. That has nothing to do with whether or not you have an insurance policy. This is a crisis. We're at war with the virus. We're at war with the virus. It has nothing to do with copays or anything. We just passed a law saying that you do not have to pay for any of this, period.
That's not true. As a matter of fact, that's not true. That law has enormous loopholes. I understand that Nancy Pelosi did her best. Republicans prevented it.
No,
what you're talking about, Joe, here is enormous loopholes within that in fact it is not necessarily covering treatment for all people in America, and that people are going to be stuck with a bill unless we change that. And we're going to offer legislation to, in fact, change that.
If I may, I offered legislation. I laid out on my plan that it would cover exactly what is not covered by the House. I laid out in the plan that I laid out for how we would deal with this crisis. Nobody will pay for anything having to do with the crisis. This is a national emergency. There isn't a question of whether or not this is something that could be covered by insurance or anything else. We, out of the Treasury, are going to pay for this. It's a national emergency.
But you see,
that's what my plan calls for.
But the weakness of this is, let's just do a hypothetical. Family members diagnosed with the virus. Yep. Terrible tragedy, massive anxiety. The wife has the virus, the husband is a wreck, wants to go to a psychologist, wants to get counseling, doesn't have the money to do that. Maybe their kid breaks a leg. They don't have the money to go to healthcare. So you're saying right now, in the middle of a crisis, but you know what? Last year, at least 30,000 people died in America because they didn't get healthcare when they should, because we don't have universal coverage. I think that's a crisis. 1 out of 5 people in America cannot afford the prescription drugs they need. They suffer. Some die. I consider that a crisis. Bottom line is, we need a simple system which exists in Canada, exists in countries all over the world. And that is, if you are an American, you get the health care you need. End of discussion. We can save huge sums of money doing that. The trick is, do we have the guts to take on the healthcare industry, some of which is funding the vice president's campaign? Do we have the courage to take on the executives at the prescription drug industry, some of whom are funding his campaign? The lesson to be learned is we have got to move aggressively right now to address the economic crisis as a result of Ebola, keep talking about Ebola. You got Ebola in my head here right now. As a result of the virus here, the coronavirus. What we have got to do also is understand the fragility of the economy and how unjust and unfair it is that so few have so much and so many have so little.
People are looking for results, not a revolution. No one is in a position where they have a significant financial disability as a consequence of this of this particular crisis.
Thank you, Vice President. Senator Sanders, you voted against bailouts following the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
Many believe those spending bills were a crucial part of stabilizing the economy back then. Would you support bailouts for industries that are being crushed by the coronavirus outbreak now?
I did you're quite right. I voted against the bailout because I believed that the illegal behavior being done by the people on Wall Street should not be rewarded by a bailout. And today, by the way, those banks are more prosperous and own more assets, and by and large, than they did back then. They're bigger now than they were then.
Let's turn to the race more broadly now. Throughout this campaign, you've each laid out starkly different visions for how to bring about change. Vice President Biden, Senator Sanders is calling for a political revolution. You said people want results, not a revolution. Make the case for why a revolution is not what the country needs or wants.
We have problems we have to solve now. Now, what's a revolution going to do? Disrupt everything in the meantime? Look, the senator talks about his Medicare for all. He still hasn't told you how he's going to ever get it passed. He hasn't told you how, in fact, there's any possibility of that happening. He hadn't told you how much it's going to cost. He hadn't tell you how it's going to apply. It doesn't kick in for 4 years even after it passes. We want a revolution. Let's act now. Pass the Biden health care plan, which takes Obamacare, restores all the cuts made to it, subsidizes further, provides for lower drug prices, make sure that there's no hidden bills, make sure that we invest, I want to invest $50 billion in dealing with underlying diseases that are of great consequence, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. What people want is hope, and they need it now, not 4 years from now. And Bernie still hasn't told us how he's going to pay for it. We're talking about a $30+ trillion plan.
Not quite true.
Senator Sanders.
Right, look, let's do something that is very rarely done in the Congress. Let's do something that the media doesn't do. Let's talk about the reality of American life.
Shots fired!
Why is it that over the last 45 years, despite the huge increase in productivity and technology, the average worker today is not making a nickel more in real dollars? Why is it that over the last 30 years, the richest 1% have seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth, bottom half of America, $900 billion decline in their wealth? Why is it that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right? Why are we the only major country not to have paid medical and family leave? Why do we give tax breaks to billionaires when 500,000 people are homeless today? And it comes down to something, Jake, we don't talk about. The power structure in America. Who has the power? And I'll tell you who has the power. It's the people who contribute money, the billionaires who contribute money to political campaigns, who control the legislative agenda. Those people have the power. And if you want to make real changes in this country, if you want to create an economy that works for all, not just the few, you want to guarantee quality health care to all, not make $100 billion in profit for the healthcare industry. You know what you need? You need to take on Wall Street. You need to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry. You don't take campaign contributions from them. You take them on and create an economy that works for all.
You want to do that? Do what I proposed over 30 years ago. Federally fund all elections. No private contributions in the election process. If you want to do that, join me. And the implication is I've not accepted a contribution from anybody over $2,800, number one. My average contribution is $44. Bernie's implication is somehow I'm being funded by millionaires. Bernie, look, in the last Super Tuesday and before that, Bernie outspent me 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1. And I still won. I didn't have any money. And I still won.
Senator Sanders?
It's good that you had an idea 30 years ago. I don't want to join you. Why don't you join me? Why don't you get rid of the super PAC that you have right now, which is running very ugly negative ads about me, by the way. Don't laugh, Joe. That's just the truth. And they got 2 other super PACs running ads against us. Why don't you just say right now, go on television and say, hey, you know what? I think in the past, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you condemned super PACs. Is that correct?
You get rid of the 9 super PACs you have?
I don't have 9 super. I don't have any super
9.
PACs.
You want me to list them?
No, yeah, you go ahead, list them.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Come on, give me a break.
No, I won't give you a break on this one, Joe. You condemned super PACs. You got a super PAC is running negative. But here's the point. This is the point.
Look, the idea that Bernie implies the way he says things, speaking of negative ads, my Lord, Bernie, you're running ads saying I'm opposed to Social Security.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time, and I tried it a fourth time.
That PolitiFact says is a flat lie, and that the Washington Post said is a flat lie.
Oh, well, let me ask you a question, Joe.
Yeah.
You're right here with me.
Yeah,
Have you been on the floor of the Senate? You were in the Senate for a few years.
yeah.
Time and time again, talking about the necessity, with pride, about cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, cutting veterans programs.
No,
You never said that.
no.